Hey everybody, it is time for another 2021-2022 season preview, and today we have another Atlantic Division team. It is the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are coming off yet another first round playoff exit and have a really big year coming up. This is a huge season for the Leafs with this management group, this coaching staff, this group of players. Patience is running thin in Toronto. They have not been able to win in the playoffs, and they've had some changes this offseason. So they're definitely going to be an interesting team and a cool one to look at here as we get ready for the new season. Before we begin, I just ask you to please hit that thumbs up and subscribe. It helps the channel a ton and is greatly appreciated. But before we start looking ahead, it is time to look back on the Toronto Maple Leafs last season. They were the best team in the North Division. They finished in first, won the North, went 35-14-7 on the year, which was good enough for 77 points. However, like I mentioned earlier, they ended up blowing a 3-1 series lead in the first round of the playoffs. They lost to the Montreal Canadiens, and it was another very disappointing end to the season for the Maple Leafs. They still haven't won a playoff series with this core group, and they're running out of time, quite frankly. Fans are getting restless. Fans are getting frustrated. And it's time for this team to go out there and win, and it's time for this team to make some sort of playoff run. Otherwise, we may see some big changes coming up in Toronto, because they've had a number of years now where it's looked like they could have gone deeper into the playoffs, and they have not been able to. They were a very good offensive team last year in the regular season, scoring 3.32 goals per game. And they were actually a pretty darn good defensive team as well in the regular season, giving up just 2.64 goals against per game. A lot of people like to rag on Toronto's defense. Even I like to mention that, Toronto's defense is kind of an area of a game that's held them back. That really wasn't the case last year. They were a very solid defensive team last year, statistically, and that's not the area that is, destroying this team the way that it was, say, 2 years ago, where their defense was such a major problem. Areas of the game, however, that they definitely do want to see improve is special teams. Power play and penalty kill definitely left a lot to be desired last season. They were 20% on the dot on the power play. And honestly, that's not terrible, but with the amount of talent that the Maple Leafs have, with the high-powered offensive players that they have, they should be better than average on the power play. And 20% is not going to cut it. That's an area of the game where they should be pushing up towards 24-25% on the man advantage. And it wasn't spectacular last year, and definitely a part of the game that they're going to want to see improve this coming season. And their penalty kill was not very good. 78.5% on the PK. That is under 80%. That is below average. Another area where they need to be better this year. Special teams were not a strong suit for this team last season. And I definitely would think that they want both of those to be improved this year. Power play and penalty kill. So, leading into this offseason now, there were a number of additions and a ton of subtractions off of this team this year in the offseason. I hope I didn't forget anybody. Especially the subtraction side, was a pretty long list, but we'll start over there on players that have left. Obviously, goaltender Frederik Andersen, gone now in Carolina. Forward Zach Hyman, he is off to Edmonton, and those were definitely the two major losses for the Leafs this offseason, Andersen and Hyman. Also, they lost Nick Foligno. He signed in Boston. Forward Joe Thornton has gone to the Florida Panthers to play at least one more season. Forward Alex Galchenyuk is gone. Defenseman Zach Bogosian and defenseman Ben Hutton, both free agents. Bogosian has signed with Tampa Bay. Goaltender David Riddick is gone. Forward Antti Suomela is gone. Depth guy Riley Nash is gone. He's now in Winnipeg. And defenseman Martin Marincin is gone as well, which that's probably a good thing. On the addition side, not quite as long of a list because the Leafs are right up against the salary cap and really didn't have a lot of money to be playing with this offseason. They replaced Frederik Andersen by bringing in goaltender Peter Mrazek from Carolina, so he and Jack Campbell will be your 1-2 punch in goal. Forward David Kampf has come over from Chicago, bottom six depth forward there. Forward Nick Ritchie and Andre Kasha have come over from the Boston Bruins. Michael Bunting comes in from Arizona, and Curtis Gabriel comes in from San Jose. So they've added some depth forwards to replace the depth forwards that they lost this offseason. But none of these, I would say, outside of Mrazek, obviously that's a pretty big signing. Outside of that, I would say that the rest of their additions were all pretty much depth guys. And guys that are either going to play in the bottom six of the forward group or maybe be extra forwards in this lineup. But they did make some additions. They've lost quite a few players. A lot of them were depth guys, but Hyman, Foligno, Anderson, Thornton, those are definitely guys that you're going to notice not there anymore as they head into the new season. So now it's time to take a look at the projected roster, my projected roster for the Toronto Maple Leafs this coming year. As you can see up front, they are obviously led by Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander, and Alex Kerfoot. Those are kind of the big guns up front. Guys that play a huge role there. Then you've got Ilya Mikheyev, Wayne Simmons, Jason Spezza, Nick Ritchie, David Kampf, Michael Bunting, Pierre Engvall, Andre Kasha, and Curtis Gabriel. Obviously, that is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 14 forwards for this team. Obviously, trying to put together a 23-man roster here. They may not run with 14 forwards. Maybe one of these guys gets waived and sent down or whatever, and they just have the extra forward depending on their cap situation. But I think these guys will have every opportunity to be on the opening night roster for the Toronto Maple Leafs. On defense, really not much has changed other than Zach Bogosian leaving. The top six pretty much remains the same. Morgan Riley, Jake Muzzin, TJ Brody, Justin Holl, Rasmus Sandin, and Travis Dermott. And I think Timothy Liljegren is at least going to get the biggest opportunity out of everybody to be the seventh defenseman. If he doesn't end up as the seventh defenseman, there are a couple other options they have that might, but I think they're going to give Liljegren pretty much every chance possible for him to be the seventh D-man and make the NHL roster this year. If he doesn't make the NHL roster, you might be looking at a trade here, and at that point, I think Toronto might be ready to move on. But he's definitely going to be an interesting guy to watch in the preseason and in training camp. In goal, I think it's pretty obvious Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek are your goaltending tandem for the Leafs this year. But then they have some depth guys that I think maybe could make a run for a regular roster spot and make some of these guys knock off maybe one or two of these guys that I have making the roster. And they also obviously have guys that they can call up in the case of injury. Nick Robertson is definitely a guy that I think is going to want to to make a case to make the opening night roster in the preseason. I think we could possibly see Amirov. Rodion Amirov could maybe possibly, with a good preseason, crack the opening night roster. If he's going to come in and play a middle six role and add some scoring to this team, that would be a very Leafs-like move to give him a shot to make it. I would not at all be surprised if he does play some NHL games this year. And then they have kind of some more bottom six type guys that if there are injuries or they need somebody to come in on the fourth line, Adam Brooks, who we saw last year, Brett Seney coming in from New Jersey, Joey Anderson. Those are guys that I think we could see in a bottom six role. If you're looking for more of a young player making an impact And looking for more of a scorer, I think Robertson or Amirov would be your guy that could sneak onto the roster. As far as defensemen go, if Timothy Liljegren does not make it as the 7th defenseman, I think it's very likely going to be Carl Dahlstrom or Alex Biega, a little bit more veteran guys. They would probably take Liljegren's spot on that D core as the extra guy. And that would obviously put Liljegren down into the depth role, who, again, if there are injuries, you could see later in the year. And as far as a third goaltender is concerned, I think Joseph Woll is likely the next guy up if something were to happen to Campbell or Mrazek. They also have Michael Hutchinson, but I think we know what Michael Hutchinson is at this point, and it's not very good. So I would rather see Joseph Woll get a chance and see him at the NHL level and get some NHL games rather than Hutchinson myself. But that is my projected roster here for the Leafs for the 2021-22 season, and I definitely think this is open to change. I think guys like Robertson, Amirov, maybe even Brooks or Anderson could end up taking one of those forward spots and knock somebody like Curtis Gabriel or Michael Bunting or Engvall or even Kasha. We don't even know what Kasha's health is going to be like. He played like 2 games last year. They could easily take one of those spots. I don't think Liljegren is even close to a lock for that 7th D spot. So I think Dahlstrom or Biega could possibly take that spot. There are definitely some roster spots up for grabs as we head into training camp here for the Leafs. But we'll have to wait and see how it all works out. Anyway, Toronto, like I said, this is a huge year for them. It's another year with this main core still intact. They haven't had any playoff success. They're spending right up to the salary cap. It's a huge year for them to find some playoff success. I really think that if they don't win a round this year, we could see some major changes happen up there. And I'm not just talking about the lineup. I'm talking about coaching and management as well. Because I think patience is running thin. They've had this group together for a while now. There's really no excuse anymore. They really can't play the youth card anymore because these guys have played in many playoff series now. I mean, Washington, Boston twice, Columbus, last year against Montreal. I mean, they've played in 5 playoff series now. Youth, you can't have the inexperienced youth excuse anymore. It's time for this team to win. And if they don't, I think we're going to see major changes. But that is my 2021-22 season preview for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Going to be a very interesting year for them and a pressure-packed year for them as they need to not only be good in the regular season as they have been, but finally find that playoff success. But with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our Patreon merchandise store donation link and channel memberships are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon.